Hello, my name is Tyler Stallman, and today I want to review the Sony a7R Mark II. Just a quick hands-on preview. As of recording, this camera hasn't been out very long, so everybody's just kind of getting the sense of what we think of it. I had a weekend to play with it thanks to the Camera Store. Check out their YouTube channel, the Camera Store TV. I think the question is, will this be a turbo-boosted amateur camera that just has a few extra features, or can it really become something that professionals consider an option? Can it compete with things like the Canon 5D? And that's my comparison. Right now, I've been using the Canon 5D Mark III for a few years now, and I was really curious if this could be a potential replacement. The price is comparable. It's a little bit more, but pretty similar. So I think stacking these cameras up to each other makes a bit of sense, even though they are very different. The main difference in design is that a mirrorless camera like this doesn't have the mirror box in the top or the mirror inside. This camera has an extremely beautiful EVF that I'm sure does not come across in this webcam video, but it is very, very sharp, and it did feel like that view of looking through it did compete with an SLR for me. I didn't feel like the refresh rate was slower or was lacking detail. I really enjoyed the experience of looking through it and seeing the image. One of the big drawbacks to this camera is the battery. The battery goes extremely fast. I'm told that you actually get 2 in the box when you purchase this, which I've never heard of that before, but it's definitely an admittance by Sony that this camera is going through batteries faster than it should. With all the Sonys that I've used, there are, I don't know, weird interface things. They've always been a little different than other brands, and that difference can be good. Right now it's pushing all sorts of innovation for them, but it can also mean that I really struggled sometimes to find specific menu items that were kind of buried. I've used Sony's quite a few times and I still haven't quite figured them out, but maybe my biggest question I had before using this camera was, how is the autofocus going to perform? I know that the images look great, the resolution is there, but the autofocus was not at a point that it could compete with the SLRs. They've redone it. There's way more focus points, all these advanced tracking systems, and you know what? I think in the end, the basic autofocus did work almost as well as a 5D. They did much better with the full screen auto tracking, so that like edge to edge there are focus points. That is amazing, and I'm gonna want to see that in Canon stuff in the future. They are not even close to that at the point, but not having them all clustered in the center was a huge advantage. I still wouldn't trust the full wide auto tracking. I did not find that it could accurately locate the subject that I wanted to track. It has facial recognition, which worked. It would find faces, but often it would choose the wrong face. In a professional situation, I'd still much rather trust a small group of tracking points that I control and I move around the screen and I know that they're right over the person's face. But you know what's great about this is even if I'm using just one tracking point, I can put it in the farthest corner and then I'm still able to track even if my subject is not somewhere in the center of the frame. Now I said resolution is great. This camera's over 40 megapixels and they are beautiful megapixels. Honestly, it was extremely sharp. I've also got to take a quick second to say that everybody knows it already, but this Sony Zeiss 55 1.8 lens is amazing, incredibly sharp. It's similar to the Sigma 50 millimeter. This is as good as any lens I've ever used. It was perfect. I really, really enjoyed it. Anyway, at 40 megapixels, yeah, it looks extremely sharp. Maybe this is just me, but a huge problem is that I can't shoot smaller than 40 megapixel RAW files. The way that I shoot is I take a lot of photos. I'll shoot on continuous. I can have a couple thousand photos from an event or from a night, and honestly, I do not need them to be 40 megapixels for most events. 20 would be plenty. So please, like the Canons, let me shoot at 20 megapixels RAW. 25 or whatever. I don't know, pick some number that is smaller. I can shoot at smaller sizes that are JPEGs, but not RAW, and that is a pretty big downside to me, maybe nobody else, so forget it. This thing has an articulating screen, which so many cameras do these days, and I have started to become very addicted to these. I think I need to have one in the next 5D or the next camera that I use full time because I just shoot like this. Honestly, it is extremely useful. I use it way more than I expected. I like that it also still has a really flat profile. even when when the screen is pressed in. So that was fantastic. Now video, okay, this camera made some huge steps forward in video. It records internal 4K and it looks very good, extremely sharp. I didn't have a chance to actually like test it. I used it and looked at the samples and they were incredibly beautiful, but this isn't going to be the video review. Somebody else has to do it. The Camera Store TV, as I mentioned, their channel will have a very in-depth review about it. But when I spoke with Jordan Drake from that channel about the video quality, his impressions were that the Super 35 setting is really the way to get perfect video out of this thing. Full frame, there is still some, I don't know, artifacting, or I am not actually sure what he was seeing as the issue, but something about downsizing the full frame to 4K was not ideal, and when you use it as Super 35, it was kind of perfect, and I tend to believe him. I often would not be shooting at 4K. That's not critical to me. I want the super sharp HD, and this had it. I was extremely happy with that. It also has things like S-Log profiles, meaning you can get a little more dynamic range out of your image. This could be a very competent video camera, much better than my 5D. Another exciting new feature about this is the support of third-party lenses and autofocus. Previously, the autofocus on, say, Canon lenses using a Metabones adapter was sketchy, barely worked. This worked very well. It was competent. I would not use Canon glass as my full-time lens on this camera. If I were to treat this as a professional camera, I would be using Sony prime lenses. Still, that's the disadvantage right now. There's not as many Sony zooms. But things like this 55 millimeter and the 35 millimeter mean that that's what I'd be putting on this camera most of the time. The Canon glass I could use as backup. It works well enough, but I wouldn't use it for an event or for action. It's still, the fact that they can do it at all is extremely impressive. Okay, finally, the recommendation of buying this. It's a little tough because I had hoped that by the end of this weekend I'd come up with a really clear answer. This is the camera of the future or it is not, and that answer is not actually very clear. There are some huge leaps forward compared to the top SLRs right now, but there are also some drawbacks. One of the big things that my wife pointed out was that when you zoom in on a photo to review the sharpness, it's actually a bit laggy. It is kind of slow. There were other moments that just navigating menus or changing settings, like it's not as fast, it's not as responsive, and that can really be a problem if you are in a professional setting. If you're not in a professional setting, this does take as good a photo, maybe a little bit better in some situations, photos than, say, the 5D Mark III. This really needs to be compared to whatever Canon does next, but if Canon doesn't do something interesting, or Nikon, this will become the future. The next round of these, they're coming out very quickly and they're becoming more and more refined. So if you haven't already committed to a lens system, you are just getting into photography and you're not really sure what you want, yes, I definitely can recommend the Sony a7R Mark II. You don't know what you're missing from the bigger cameras and you're gaining so much. This camera is incredibly beautiful. It's incredibly small. If you're on Twitter, go follow me. I'm @Stallman, and that's where I'll post new things that I do. Thanks for watching.